Proverbs 6. So I haven't run the air conditioner all day because I like it about 80 degrees. So if you're a little bit warm, you have the thermostat, Maria. You can put it down to 50 if you want. Although LaShonda will probably throw something at you. So Solomon continues, or we continue, and he changes up some of the themes tonight. So in verse 1, he says, "My son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands in a pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth, you are taken by the words of your mouth." The context here is becoming an assurance. Doesn't say that he went and co-signed for this guy, but he pledged to be a co-signer for this man's debt and assure this man that he'll cover all of his expenses if something fails. And so Solomon is saying, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't make agreements like this with anybody. That it's not wise. He says, you'll be snared by the words of your mouth. A snare is a trap. It is, a rabbit goes bouncing through the forest, and if you got a snare, you got a loop, and it's connected to something. When the rabbit hits the snare, it pops up, and there it is hanging in the tree, waiting for the person that ensnared it to come and get it. And so he's writing to this his son, and he says, you know what? You're snared by the words that you speak. Now, I'm going to share something kind of off subject in one sense here, and that is the words that we speak and the conversations we have with people. Sometimes they want to tell us their secrets, but then they want to tell us, but you can't tell anybody. That's an ensnarement. That's an ensnarement in many cases. Now I understand counselors, and I understand, to get a good counselor and be able to share your heart with somebody should be in confidence. But at the same time, there are those people who love to do, and we'll get into it a little bit further here tonight, that want to entrap people and get you obligated in their little conspiracies and their things. Don't do it. If you can't repeat it in a sense of a simple conversation, then politely say, no, I really don't want to hear that, and no, I don't want to participate in that, because people do it all the time. They do. They want to ensnare us. People are very good at these types of things, as we'll find out a little bit further. So, anyways, many of you might remember the issue of King Jehoshaphat. He was the son-in-law of King Ahab. He married her daughter, and Jezebel. And so he goes down to visit Ahab, who is the king of the tribes of Israel. And Jehoshaphat is a godly man, the king of the tribe of Judah, and some of the surrounding Benjamites and Simeonites were also involved with Judah. And so he goes down and to spend time with daddy-in-law, and daddy-in-law ensnares him in a scheme to go to war. And so he says, I'm going to go out to war against the Syrians. Do you want to go with me? And we don't know exactly how he worded that other than the scripture itself, but he enticed Jehoshaphat to go with him. Now, Jehoshaphat, the priests of Baal came out and they're all saying, go for it, go for it, go for it, you're going to win. And Jehoshaphat's smart enough to say, don't you have a prophet of God here, Jehovah? And he said, yeah, there is one. He's in prison. I don't like him. He never gives me good counsel. Well, why don't you call for him? Let's see what he has to say. So the guy comes out, and the whole scheme of deceiving Ahab into going to war, because God wanted to kill Ahab. And so he deceives him, and so Ahab says, yeah, you're lying to me. There's no victory here. You never been positive towards me. And he says, well, you're right. He says, if you go out to war, O Ahab, you're going to die. And if you don't die, then I'm no prophet. And Ahab sends him back to prison. Told you I didn't like that guy. I didn't like what he said. Well, Jehoshaphat, what should he have done at that point in time? Uh-oh, I've been ensnared in my words. I'm going back to Judah. He doesn't do that. He goes out to war with Ahab, and Ahab changes his clothing from the king's clothing to be an anonymous soldier. But he lets Jehoshaphat wear his king's clothing, and when they go out to battle, the Syrians see Jehoshaphat and say, there's Ahab, and let's go kill him. And so they start surrounding Jehoshaphat, and then it finally dawns on them, this is an Ahab. And that was God's provision for Jehoshaphat. And then randomly it tells us there was a guy with a bow and an arrow, and he just shoots it up in the air, and guess where it falls? Right in between the armor of Ahab. Didn't even aim for him. God just directed that arrow right at Ahab, and it got him. And he died. He had to leave the battle, and he died. And Jehoshaphat goes away, and he escapes with his people. But God later rebuked Jehoshaphat for signing up with a wicked king who hated God, wanted nothing to do with God. So God, somewhat spanked Jehoshaphat. You can read the rest of the story. But the point being is Jehoshaphat said, yeah, we'll go out to battle together and I'll be there with you thick and thin. Foolish. Foolish. He wasn't using wisdom. He should have used a little bit of wisdom to go, oh my, no, this is my father-in-law. I know what he's like. God rebukes him all the time. He's got a witch for a wife. Should I really go out to battle with him? No, I think not. I think I'm going to go home. But that's not what he does. And so he's hooked and ensnared by his words. Has anybody here ever opened your mouth and then later you said, but I told them I would do it, and got bound by your words? Or am I the only person that's ever done something foolish like this? It happens to a lot of people. Happens to young people. All of a sudden you're saying, yeah, I'll be there with you. We'll do this together. And you become a surety. You have given your pledge to a person that doesn't deserve your pledge. Your loyalty. My loyalty and your loyalty is to Jesus Christ first and foremost. Second would be my family, and it almost goes hand in hand, but then the body of Christ. And there is a place for love. There is a place for us to be sacrificial towards one another. There is. But not by obligation in the sense of what you think. It's not by, somebody conspiring and manipulating the whole situation. And so he's going to give some strong words to his son. He says, if you have done this and you're ensnared by your words, he said, so do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend Go and humble yourself. And there's an urgency here. Go do it and do it now. And I know people, and I've known myself to have got myself ensnared by words, and I wiggle in my own self going, how am I going to get out of this? Well, the longer I wait, the worse it gets. The more I justify it. And he says, no, there's an urgency here. Get yourself unentangled from your friend. And the note here, or the note that I have, is he has yet to go sign on the dotted line with the creditor. Right now, his words are just to his friend, quote unquote, friend. And he says, humble yourself. And the truth of the matter is, he may lose a friend, but he will gain his freedom. And if the guy's really a friend, he will understand. You know, he will understand, and if not, then, you know, he won't. But go get yourself unencumbered and unentangled from such commitments. The Hebrew says, offer thyself to be trodden upon, or throw thyself down at his feet. That's what it means to be humble here. In other words, eat your crow, you know, yum yum, and but eat your crow rather than destroy your future. Let somebody else destroy it by your words. Because if you become surety for somebody, if you become the guarantor of their loans, then guess what? When the person can't pay their loan, who are they coming for? They're coming for you and your family, and they will destroy your future. And again, this is just wisdom. This is, again, this doesn't mean we treat every person, like a suspect. But at the same time, my pat answer when people come to me with these things quite often is, have you gone to pray about it? Have you asked God what he wants to do? Because he's a provider, right? He's a good shepherd. But I find that people want to come to me as a pastor first and then go humble themselves and seek the Lord. I'm like, well, why don't you go pray about it for a week? Whether they do, whether they don't, it's like, I know God to be faithful. He'll provide. He'll make a way out. He'll make a way through. That's what he says, right? And I've had to humble myself in business. Some of you have heard this story. $30,000 mistake. How am I going to get out of this? And I just had to keep working on the project because I couldn't just quit. And I had to keep working on it. Told my employers, hey, this is what we got. This is our problem. And so I kept working and working and working with one of the guys that actually made the mistake. And when it was all said and done and the project was over, when we settled up accounts, I owed them $30,000 for the mistake, or at least my company did. But they owed me $30,000 for all the extra work I did for them, so it was a wash. That was God. That was God. And I was stressing and stressing and stressing. Finally, I had to just turn it over to the Lord. It's in your hands, God. You want me to be humbled? Whatever. I've already humbled myself. I've gone to them. I've owned it. I realize they're going to take advantage of me. And they did. They double charged me for everything that they had to fix. But whatever. I got myself out of it. And God got me through it. And that's the encouragement in all of this, is God is faithful. If I make a blunder, God will be there with me in my blunder. I don't intend to make blunders, but if I ever find myself, and I have, then he'll get me out. He'll make a way. And so he gives his son an example. He said, deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter. What's the thing we know about a gazelle? They run fast, absolutely. They see a predator and they're running, right? Because cheetahs run pretty fast too, don't they? In fact, they're supposed to be the fastest land animal that there is, a cheetah, but that's for a short, they're like sprinters, you know? And the gazelle, if it gets a heads up on it, it's running away. It's running from the predator. And he says, hey, you know what? You need to do the same thing. You need to act like a gazelle and get yourself freed from what? The ensnarement that you find yourself in. And then he gives another example. He said, birds fly the same way. They fly fast, and when they see the fowler's net, what do? They don't fly right into it. They fly away from it as fast as they can because it's a threat. You know, every morning I get up and drink my coffee and I watch the birds on our deck. My wife feeds bluebirds and lots of sparrows, lots of grackles. You know, the doves get in this feeder by them. You know, sometimes you get 2 doves, and they're rather large birds in this feeder, with a couple of sparrows in there too. And, you know, it's like a merry group of birds there. And so I get to watch them, but if I move up towards that window, those sparrows are gone. They're gone. They don't trust me. And, you know, and then I go, why don't you trust me? No, I'm just kidding. And sometimes the doves will stay there for a little while till I crack the door, and then they look at me and go, you take one more step, we're out of here. And they are. They're gone. The grackles are a little more bold. They'll come down. I could be sitting there. They'll come down and grab some seed and fly away. But, you know, I watch these birds every day. They don't trust me. Can you blame them? I'm big. They're not. Right? I'm threatening. They don't know that I'm not. But they see me as a threat, so they fly quickly. They go over to the next tree, and then they watch me till I go back in the house, and then they come back over, and they eat. They know that sliding glass door is there, and they're safe. Anyway. So, just to make a point here, how many of you went through the book of Ruth? What's the book of Ruth about? About redemption. Should Naomi's husband have gone from the house of bread to Moab? He did. And I believe that God wanted him to go there because there was Ruth. And she had faith. And so God allowed him to go into debt so that he would go over there. And in the midst of all the tragedies of her sons dying, her husband dying, what ends up happening? Redemption. She lost everything. She couldn't buy back her property. She couldn't raise up a child to carry on the family name. And yet God made a way, did he not? He absolutely made a way. And it had to be a man that had the riches and the will and the wherewithal to be able to do it. Well, guess what? Boaz is a perfect representative of Jesus Christ. He had to be able to make the payment for us. It was costly, and he made it. He had to be willing to make it, and he was willing, right? So, that's our Savior, right? So he had everything, you know, he had the pedigree, everything was there. And he said, yes, I will. I will go, and I will make their payment for them so that they can receive the riches that we have, right? The hope of heaven. So that's why I love the book of Ruth, you know, and there's a lot more into it than that, but it's a beautiful book. One of the things that you may not know, or maybe you did, is Ruth is a Gentile. So Boaz is a Jew. So Boaz gets a what? Gentile bride. But then again, there's Naomi, the mother-in-law, who's a Jew, right? So you see God, it's actually a picture of what Jesus would do later, right? We received our grace through the Jewish nation by the grace of God. So, anyways, verses 6 through 8. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways, be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. Solomon probably, sat and pondered, being the guy that he was. He probably watched ants and an ant colony. He probably messed around with it like we did when we were kids and covered up the door, seeing if you could get rid of them. And then watched them dig their hole right out again and come out, storming, going about getting food and all that stuff. Well, ant colonies are different. They have a queen, and that queen, when she ends up in a colony, she has wings initially to fly to wherever they're going to make their colony. But once she puts her body inside that colony, she loses her wings. And then there's female ants, and there's male ants. There's workers, there's harvesters, and, ants are industrious. You ever watch an ant colony? You ever seen? They don't stop. They get up, they're moving all the time. And one line's going this way and one line's coming back with food, they can carry, 20 times their weight on their back. But they are very industrious, and every one of these colonies is meant to be bigger and bigger. They do not have a leader. They always say the queen is the leader. She is not. She's not giving out instructions. She is there to make babies. That's what she's there for. And believe it or not, when the males come in, they know intuitively how many of the different types of other ants that are needed for the colony. So that's all transmitted. So if they need more worker women, then that's the way they mate, so that there's a whole bunch of worker women. And if they need more guys going out to fight and go out to harvest, then guess what? That's what they do, is they go impregnate her so that she has a bunch of guys, But their communication is just incredible. But Solomon is pointing at their industrialness. In other words, they are a model of industry, of diligence, of faithfulness, because guess what? They are always storing up. There's no season that wipes them out. They get prepared. They're always looking to the future to prepare for the future. Inside of a nest, you've got all these little rooms down there. Some of the rooms are for, food. Some of them are for, the larvae and the babies. And they just have all these separate little rooms. And it's all divided up, but there's no real leader that says, do this and do that and do this and do that. At least we haven't figured out how they communicate that. But the Communist Party has tried to take their model and say, hey, here's the perfect model of the Soviet man. Well, okay, whatever, machines. But ants are very industrious, and so he comes out dealing with a guy that is a sluggard, and he says, hey, take a look at the ants. You probably ought to study them and go emulate some of the things that they're doing. Be industrious. I was here last night, and everybody forsook me. No, just kidding. I was the last one. I was talking to one of the Ukrainian guys, and Ruslan is his name, and we're somewhat close. And Ruslan was in the Soviet army, but he was a conscientious objector in the sense of he wouldn't carry a weapon. So they put him into engineers, and I guess either his father or his grandfather was under Stalin as a born-again believer. So Stalin banished him to 10 years to Western Russia, the Gulag, and he was out there harvesting timber for 5 years until the war was over, and then they let him go home. And so my friend Ruslan said, if my grandfather or my father could go to the Gulag for 10 years, he said, I can join the army for 2 years and survive. He thought that he got off with a light sentence compared to. But I was talking to him about the industriousness or industriousness of the Ukrainians and the Russians that come here. And they all prosper. They are all find ways to make money. And not just a little bit of money. They find ways to, optimize our economy. And they find ways to work the system. And they are hard workers. I'm not saying they're on the take. But they, I told him, most of us Americans could take a page out of your book. Maybe you should start a school, teach us how to learn to be industrious once again. Because in some ways in America, we have lost that ability, Feed me, Uncle Joe, or whoever else, whatever. So, and we were just comparing notes, and just, I liked the guy. I told him a story about a Russian guy that I read about that flew a MiG-25 from the biggest air base on the Pacific, what is used to be called Kamchatka. Can't remember the official name now, under Russia, but there was MiG-25s there, which at that time was the fastest jet in the world. Scared us to death because we didn't seem to have anything like it. So he flew it to Japan, and they wanted it back, and they sable rattled and all that stuff. Well, we took it apart and shipped it to the United States, went piece by piece by piece and figured out what made it tick. And anyways, this guy ended up, after going through the interrogation probably from the CIA intelligence agencies, they took him for a drive around Washington, D.C., and they took him to a grocery store. And he's like, nah, this is a lie. This is a lie. This is propaganda. They said, no, it isn't. Yeah, it is. I know about Soviet lies, and I know you guys are a bunch of liars, too. You're trying to show me the best. So they took him to another one. Yeah, this is still a lie. This is a setup. After going to 12 grocery stores, he was finally convinced, oh, I guess this isn't a lie. And he was amazed at America's prosperity and industrial, might, and to put food on the table in such abundance. And I remember that to this day. Now, I don't know what became of the guy, but I'm sure he was paid quite well by our intelligence agency, probably, secret, Air Force guy, but whatever. That was my first kind of contact with the Russians, or Soviet pilot, and very interesting stuff. And so to have them in our church and know so many Ukrainians, it's like these people, when they went to the grocery store, you went very early in the morning, because if there was butter there, it was gone by 10 o'clock. And you could have all the money in the world, but there wasn't going to be any more butter. Same with socks and everything else. It just kind of came when it was there. You had to be ready. You had to have cash on hand. And so coming here for the older ones, there's a gratefulness to be here. And anyway, sluggards they are not. Maybe the next generation after they went to our schools and sorry. So, the previous thing, common sense is necessary. Common sense. What is common sense? It's to make yourself so valuable nobody wants to fire you. They can't live without you. That's common sense. And Americans, in some ways, have lost that common sense. We think it's owed to us. And it's not. It's not. There's a few of you that have employees. Doesn't make you pull your hair out, does it? Yeah, it does. Because many of them come in saying, me, I. And I dealt with that running a couple of businesses. And I had one guy come in and he just showed up for a month every day. He was an hour late. But after that month, he said, can I get a raise? I said, get a raise for what? Well, I've been here showing up every day for a month. I said, man, when you start being valuable, I'll gladly make sure you get a raise. When you start prospering this company, you will find, raises, but to just show up at work like a body and you expect to get a raise? Well, he ended up going to join the Army. It's probably a good thing for him. Might have learned a little discipline there. I don't know, but yeah. So, so 9, how long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come upon you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. In other words, all of a sudden you're going to find yourself not being able to get out of the situation you're in. You did not apply yourself. And it's a sad thing to watch somebody waste and squander. And I have seen this. Squander opportunities. They work hard for a season and then they start taking advantage of the company. And then they find out they're the first one that's fired. Let go when it comes time for the pinch, push coming to shove. And they go, why am I, didn't I work real hard here? It's like you should have worked real hard every day. Every day. And you'd have been so valuable, nobody would want to get rid of you. But I've been around people like that, and it's a very sad deal. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. What about the church? You think the church is slumbering and sleeping? I'll leave that as a question for you to ask. I'm not talking about you slumbering and sleeping. I'm talking about the church here in the United States. You think it's slumbering and sleeping? Let me give you something from 1 Thessalonians 5, 3 through 8. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. They shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in the darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of the light and sons of the day. We are not of the night, nor of the darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. Now, he's not talking about don't take a nap. He's not talking about don't go to bed at night and get your 8 hours of sleep or whatever you need. He's talking about walking around in this world, sleeping through what we see and what we know. That's what he's talking about, spiritual slumber. But let us watch and be sober, for those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith, love, and as the helmet, the hope of salvation. I would take you back to Sunday morning. The blessed hope. That's our hope. It is. So in Revelation 3, 1 through 6, which I got to go find that. I didn't print it out. It's about a church named Sardis. And this is a very interesting church. To the angel of the church in Sardis write. And there's a couple of different interpretations of what Sardis means. Some say remnant. Some say softness and luxury. I don't know which way to take it because there's nothing definitive on this. But it is a church. He says, these things says he who has the 7 spirits of God, the 7 stars. I know your works, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead. So the first thing that he deals with is this church has a name. Named churches didn't come on the scene till the 1500s. And then you became what? Oh, there was the Huguenots, but they weren't a church. They were a group of Christians in France. But you had what? Those who followed Lutheran, which became what? The Lutheran Church, right? Then you had the Wesleyan Methodists, which became what? The Methodist Church. You had Baptists that migrated out from England and the Netherlands, and they are called what? Baptists, right? And then you have the Church of England, Presbyterians, Episcopalians. They're branches from the Church of England. They are in the world to this day. And then there's later churches with other names, Calvary Chapel being one, Pentecostal or Assemblies of God being another, and Foursquare churches and other different brands, and I'm not exhaustive in this whatsoever. So he's talking about that era. He has to be, because there was no named churches before that. And he says, you have a name that you are alive, but you are dead. That's a pretty sad commentary, wouldn't you say? In other words, they're trusting in whatever they did when they first got the name. Where certainly Martin Luther did some great things as far as the Reformation. I have some question marks on his anti-Semitism and a few other things that he did, but you know what? He started the ball rolling. You know? And a lot of these churches were very powerful in their day, initial. But then he goes on, he says, be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die. For I have not found your works perfect before God. Remember therefore how you have received and heard, and hold fast and repent. Therefore, if you will not watch, I mean stay awake, I will come upon you as a thief, and you will not know what hour I will come upon you. Let me give you a little history lesson of Sardis. Alexander the Great was coming through Turkey, conquering. And Sardis was a city in a valley. And that valley ran, I don't know if it was north or south or east or west, but it was a broad valley where they could grow crops. They had the town down there, where people dwelt. But up on the side of the hill, they had this fortress. That's literally what it was. For those of you who have seen The Lord of the Rings, maybe the second one where they're in the, head to the keep, where they had the wall and, all that stuff. Well, they had this fortress up on the side of the hill. And Alexander the Great came by, and he knew he couldn't leave because all the people were up there. They had food stored and everything else. And he knew if he went down the road, they would cut off his supply lines. So he couldn't just bypass it. He had to find some way to destroy it and conquer it so he could continue on his, conquest down the valley. So they are there, and there's just one road that leads up to it, and then there's a high wall, and, you can only get so many soldiers on that particular road, so they could throw rocks at you, pour oil on you, archers, and it's all downhill where you're at. It was no way for them to win that. They couldn't get enough firepower to defeat, the people of Sardis up there. So they're studying all this stuff and trying to figure out a way to get up in there. And Alexander's probably way down in the valley. And he's got some guy up there, an engineer, an officer. And all of a sudden they see this helmet. And it falls off one of the guy's heads up on the top of the keep, the castle. Bing, 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 bing. Interesting. Okay. Guy lost his hat. Well, they kept watching. And pretty soon, somebody pokes out where that helmet is. And they don't come out the main gate. They come out another gate that they couldn't see. And he picks up his helmet, brushes it off, goes back behind the rocks, and goes back up into the castle. Aha! There's another way in. And so what did they do? They got their Rangers and the SEAL team and, Delta Force. And they went to go find out where this door was. And they found this door. And so they rushed the door and nobody was there. So they came up inside the city with no opposition. And when they got up into the city, guess what was going on? Shh. All the soldiers were sleeping. They conquered it. This happened twice in the history of this city. Once with Alexander the Great, and later with another army that came through. Same identical thing. The people were sleeping. They weren't awake. They weren't aware. And so you think Jesus is using their history to speak to them? Absolutely. If you won't watch, guess what? I'll come upon you, and you won't know what hour I come. Right? Now you can look at the world as you see it, and I can look at it, and I make my deductions about what's going on and why, the reasons we're here in the United States under this tyranny. How many of you have been pulling the R lever forever and a day, thinking that they were Christians, good Christian guys and gals? What are we finding out now? They're not. They're no different than the D's. They're in it for money, and they're in opposition against the American people in many ways. There's a few that are not. There are. You need to find out who they are so you can pray for them. How do we go to sleep? How come we didn't do due diligence to find out who these people were? Because we're lazy. I'm just going to be honest. The church is lazy. Goebbels. You all have heard of Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister of Germany. He says the rank and file are usually much more primitive than we imagine. Propaganda must therefore always be essentially simple and repetitious. That's what he told his people. And he was a master of propaganda. You look at the German nation. They ended up the way they did because of propaganda. They believed the lie. They weren't all bad people. They weren't. But because of the propaganda and because they were lazy, guess what? Tyranny overtook their government. And they bought into the lie, which brought incredible destruction upon them. Incredible destruction. So, anyways, I don't know why the side trip, but, and I don't believe that anybody sitting in this room is asleep. I don't. I think you're the most awake group of Christians maybe in this city. And I'm sure there's others. But you know what? There's not a lot. There's not a lot. Because guess what? Most churches here are not talking about the events of our day. They're not. They're afraid to. They're afraid to tell the truth of what's going on. And I can't tell you I want to tell it every Sunday, but I get my plugs in there. But, you know, we need to be aware. Anyways, chapter 6, verses 12 through 15. I can find my place again. So, we shouldn't be sluggards as business people, and we shouldn't be sluggards as what? God's people. A worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eyes. He shuffles his feet. He points his fingers. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Therefore, his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. So the mouth, corruption of his speech. And it's hard to define who's corrupt and who's not, because guess what? In our public arena, they cover up their real lives very well with sound bites and other things. And body language is an art. You know, if you ever see pictures of Joseph Goebbels or Adolf Hitler or some of their other henchmen, you always see pictures of them, you know, in these poses and all these things. They used everything that they had. They were the perfectionists of the art of propaganda and manipulation. There's whole films of Hitler figuring out the best way to give a speech, like when he was at Nuremberg, you know, and how to rally the people and rile the people using evil methods and what? Hatred. The dividing line of bitterness and hatred and class envy and all that stuff. Same stuff that is going on to this day, right? So he says, these are those type of people, and they, what? They sow discord, strife and contention. It's one of my greatest fears in a church is where all of a sudden people start talking and they start taking shots, leadership, pastor, and then they start telling other people about the shots that they believe they have a right to take. I'd rather somebody come to me to my face and tell me what they think than go behind my back. It'd be much better for them, because God's going to deal with them. Because you see, he loves the people in this church. Oh, he knows he's got a flawed pastor. He's got that, right? But he doesn't want people sowing discord. It's one of the worst things you can do in a family, in a government, and in a church, is start dividing people. Start getting little cliques together, start talking. And the people that typically do this are very subtle. They throw something out there to see if you're going to, take that little morsel. And if you take that little morsel, you find out later it's got a big old hook. And God is going to say later, he hates this. He hates that kind of stuff. And it's like, because he cares about what? The people that come here. And there's young believers here that sometimes people just don't care about, because they care about themselves more so than the body of Christ. So anyway, verse 16 through 19, these 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to run in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and he who sows discord amongst brethren. Same deal. So, proud look is the attitude that makes one overestimate oneself and discount others. Nobody's ever met anybody like this, have you? Yeah, we have. And it goes on. I'll let you just take the rest of it apart. It's pretty self-explanatory. Lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood. It just goes on. It seems to be the wicked leaders are, line up right along with these 7 things. They do. My son, keep your father's commands. Do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you awake, they will speak with you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light. So the Psalm 19, I think verse 8, says the same thing. But then you get to this latter portion of 23. Reproof and instruction are the way of life. The word for reproof is rebuke. What is he saying? Does God constantly rebuke you? Well, in many ways he critiques us because we're in the Word. He does surgery. That's the benefit of being in a church where God's Word is taught, because he does. He does the heart surgery. I don't have to do the heart surgery. I don't have to constantly be trying to adjust people. He does the adjustment. It's the Spirit of God who does those things. Reproof. When I was a surveyor, you build everything from a plan. And I can guarantee you, no matter where you go in this city, whatever road, whatever building, and you pull the tape out, you would find out it's not built exactly like that plan. As minor little adjustments here, and minor little adjustments there that you would never see with the naked eye. And so whenever you get on a big project, you're constantly doing what? Bringing things back to the plan. You're reproving so that you match the plan the best that you can. It's never going to be perfect. It's not identical. It doesn't work like that. Airplanes the same way, ships the same way. Every airplane has its own little flight characteristics, because you can't make it identical. You do the best that you can. Same with a ship. A ship is, you measure it out and all that stuff, but, sometimes this bulkhead's a little bit longer than that bulkhead, and you know what? But it floats. It does exactly what, the brochure says it will do, but it's not identical to the plan. So you're constantly adjusting to the plan. Well, guess what? That's the way of our lives. The way of our lives is I get off course. And God says, okay, I'm going to adjust you to get you back on course. Usually that's just a word. Usually that's all he needs to do is just speak to us, and I get convicted, and he's going, we need to adjust this in your life. Okay, I get it. If I won't adjust to that, then maybe he'll make it a little more plain. Boom, 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 boom. I'll hit every red light going down O Street. And believe me, when I do that, I get frustrated, and I'm like, all right, Lord, what's going on? And I'm a frustrated driver. I like to get there, So, usually when I had red lights like that, I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you saying? That's just one little area where he definitely lets me know that I'm not quite as pure as wind-driven snow as I think, So he says, my son, keep your father's commands, and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you awake, they will speak with you. For the commandment is a lamp, and I already went through that. Reproof. To keep you from the evil woman. Now, once again, he goes back through adultery here. I will read it for our sake, but we've already been through this. Do not lust after her beauty in your heart, nor let her allure you with her eyelids. For by means of a harlot, a man is reduced to a crust of bread. How many of you like eating crusts of bread? Especially John. Okay, somebody. That Franciscan bread from, I don't even know if it comes from San Francisco, but the thick crust stuff, it's like, not really. Don't, give me the middle of the bread. I would much rather have that, than the crust. I mean, a little bit of crust I can deal with, but not a lot of, anyways. And so, reduced to a crust of bread, something nobody wants to eat. Nobody wants it. You throw it back in the fire to make the fire a little bit hotter. You don't need it. He says, an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Can a man take fire to his bosom and his clothes not be burned? What's the obvious answer? Not unless you're one of them magicians that walks across the coals in Hawaii. Maybe been in. You guys will get to see that. I don't know, but I don't want to walk across them. I think my feet will get burned. If I take a coal to my chest, it's probably going to burn my clothes, and if I leave it there long enough, it's going to burn my skin. Right? So he says, can you do that? Can you take an adulteress? Can you commit adultery and not get burned? The obvious answer is no. Can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be seared? Probably not. So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent. Go down to verse 32. Whoever commits adultery with a woman lacks understanding. He who does so destroys his own soul. Wounds and dishonor will he get. His reproach will not be wiped away, for jealousy is a husband's fury. Therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will accept no recompense, nor will he be appeased, though you give him many gifts. And there's a thing that goes on, and it seems to be Latin American. It's Italy, Spain. Certainly it's in Mexico. I learned about it from my friend Juan Flores, who grew up in Tijuana. When you see a truck driving down the road, and either it has bullhorns on top of the cab or on the front of the grill, that's a symbol. It's a sign. And what it is a sign of, and this is in Spain, it's in Italy. There's actually a word for it that I can't choose not to pronounce or try to. That is a man who has had a wife that has committed adultery upon him. It's a sign of that. He's not forgetting. That's why he puts the horns up there. He is not forgetting what happened to him. And there's two to tango, so he's probably got a grievance against his wife and the guy that took his wife. But it's a legitimate thing, very much. So if you happen to go to Mexico and you get to see that, then now you know why they have the horns on their vehicles. It's not just for an ornament. It's sending a signal. So give a wide berth to that man. I guess. I have no idea. But he goes back and he says, people do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is starving. Yet when he is found, he must restore sevenfold. He may have to give up all the substance of his house. So he sandwiches that in between, because you see, we want to kill the person that steals from us. Adultery doesn't seem to be that high on the list, but stealing seems to be higher on the list. And he says, you know what, if a guy steals because he's starving, give him a break. Yeah, he's got to pay you back, but it's not as bad as you think. He's just trying to satisfy his hunger, right? It's a balance thing. So I'll close with this. This comes from Genesis 35:22. While Israel was living in that land, Reuben, his eldest son, went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. Reuben went into his wife. Well, she's a concubine, but it's his wife. And his wife, Rachel, had just died. And it probably was a real big slight against him, because maybe he would have went to her for comfort, and then he finds this out. Israel never says anything to Reuben about it in all the text until we come to the end. This comes from Genesis 49:3-4. He's given a prophecy about his sons. Reuben was number one son, for those who remember Charlie Chan. Yeah, John. You like to eat crusts of bread. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength. That's how he viewed him. The excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. That's how he initially viewed his son. Then he says, unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed, and then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. So he committed adultery, basically, with his stepmother. And I don't know what he thought about or whatever, but it has a way to come back. And it came back to him, and he was not going to be the number one son. Judah was. Judah was. And Judah had his problems, but Judah repented. We never find where Reuben repents. You just let it pass, thinking, oh, it'll just go away. You've heard that expression, time heals all wounds. There are certain wounds that time will not take away. I don't know if, Israel had a special set of horns on top of his donkey or not. But he didn't forget. And neither did God. Because of what? Because he wasn't a man of character. He wasn't a man of character. Judah, on the other hand, was a man of character. Oh, he blew it. He committed fornication. When his daughter-in-law acted like a harlot on the side of the road. He went in to take a little comfort there, like Paul Simon said in his song. And gave her his signet ring and his cord. And he went away and said, I'll send back a lamb, and then you make sure I get my cord back and my signet ring. Well, he sent a friend back to pay her, and she wasn't there. And he inquired from everybody, is there a harlot that hangs out here on this street corner? No, we've never seen a harlot here. Later he finds out his daughter-in-law is pregnant. And what did he say? Ooh, I get to get rid of that girlie. Take her out and stone her. And she says, oh, before you do that, let me let you know who the man whose child I am carrying. You happen to know who owns this ring? Yeah, do you happen to know who owns his cord? Oh, my. And Reuben said, you're more righteous than I. Right? Or not Reuben, but Judah. And then the topper was when Judah came back with Benjamin and Joseph wanted to keep him. He said, you can't do that. You can't do that. Break my dad's heart. He said, you keep me. I'll stay here as your slave. You let my brother go, or my dad will die. That's when Joseph broke. Because there was one brother that stood up and said, no, I won't do this again. I won't do this again. I love my dad too much. I've already seen his heart get broken over Joseph. Little did he know Joseph was standing right in front of him. But Joseph got to see his character. You think there's no reason why God raised up Judah? There is. Because what came forth from his life at that moment was the real deal. Character. Sacrificial character. And so Reuben's passed by, Simeon's passed by, Levi's passed by, but Judah, it fell on Judah. And that's where David come from, wouldn't he? That's where our Savior comes from, right? The Lion of the tribe of where? Judah, right? So, yeah. So, we're done. Took a little liberty there, but and the next chapter is about, once again, adultery, harlot. So we're going to skip it. I'm going to ask you to read 7, but we won't be studying 7. You can do that on your own and read it. We've already been through that issue multiple times. We'll be going to chapter 8. So I think we got the point of the issues of adultery and all that stuff. So, but if you will read it, it would be good, because maybe there's something in there that's will stick out for you. But unfortunately for Solomon, he didn't listen to his own advice. It's one thing to start well, but it's got to finish well too, right? Starting well is not good enough. Finishing well, right? Paul said, I've run the race. I've finished my course. I'm ready to go be with the Lord. That's a goal. And it's not that this life doesn't throw curveballs and there's not pain involved with it and certain trials that come our way that we wish we didn't have to deal with, but God uses all that stuff. We comfort those wherewith we have been comforted. And I happen to know that to be true. You know, I'm not too big on listening to preachers who think they got it all together. I'm more interested in a preacher that shows a little bit of crack. They don't have to tell me everything, but enough crack to know that they're human. They know what the grace of God is. They know what the mercy of God is. And they extend that to the people that they teach. Because boy, do we need it. We need it. So, Lord, thanks for this time. Thanks for your word. Thank you for those who came to hear it and those might be watching it on Vimeo. Lord, teach us how to walk with you. Help us not to be afraid of your reproof, Lord, because sooner or later we get closer to the real deal. It's not like we constantly have to make major adjustments, Lord. It's just little critiques as we grow closer to you and closer into the image of Jesus Christ. So, Lord, I pray that you bless your people. Lord, I know that there are some here that are in the middle of just a deep trial. Lord, I ask and pray that you bless with comfort, with the presence of your Spirit, with encouragement, and Lord, just please have mercy, and have mercy on all of us. In Jesus' name, amen. If you're into ice cream, there's some in there. If you're not into ice cream, then just leave it, pass on by.